Joe Manchin is, and I hate to put it this way, the ultimate tease. Because for weeks he had talked about like, oh, hey, maybe I'll do something about the filibuster. Like I'm not gonna totally get rid of it, but like maybe we can make them talk or something. Maybe we can make the filibuster look, like kind of like the filibuster. But no, now apparently he's doubling back down. He's not gonna do anything about it. And he is going to explain himself in a way that's even more frustrating than that headline version. So here is a little bit of his op-ed from the Washington Post. He says, and this is getting into a few different aspects of why our politics doesn't work anymore. He says, it's no accident that a state as small as West Virginia has the same number of senators as California or Texas. It goes to the heart of what representative government is all about. The founding fathers understood that the challenges facing a rural or small state would always be very different from a more populous state. Designating each state with the same number of senators, regardless of the population, ensured that rural and small states and the Americans who live in them would always have a seat at the table. Well, look, to be clear, it ensures that they always have the exact same seat at the table, and that I, living in California, am worth like 1/80th what a person who lives in the smallest state is worth. If you want to explain why that makes sense, do so specifically. Again, just like Tucker Carlson yesterday, Joe Manchin being very vague about that right there. And by the way, with it being no accident that those small rural states have the same political representation as the bigger ones, you're right that it's no accident, but you're missing a bit of the historical context. Slavery was a bit of a part of that. They wanted to protect that, and he is just totally leaving that out here. But he goes on to say the filibuster is a critical tool to protecting that input in our democratic form of government. There is no circumstance in which I will vote to eliminate or weaken the filibuster, even by making them actually filibuster. The time has come to end these political games and to usher a new era of bipartisanship where we find common ground on the major policy debates facing our nation. I have thoughts on that, but Rashad, what do you think so far?
Obviously, President Manchin holds all the keys here. And I say that intentionally. It's as if Joe Biden is completely powerless against the Manchin effect. I think it's a ridiculous op-ed. I did read that op-ed as well. We have real lives in the balance here, okay? It is time for Democrats, I'm talking about all of them, to launch a real campaign in Manchin state to show how he's hurting his own citizens that elected him. You have to make the case. Messaging is something that Democrats have failed on routinely. Republicans are much better at messaging, especially messaging around a lie. But Joe Manchin, this guy should not hold the keys to this. The filibuster in utilization has been exercised in order to keep black people down. It was exercised and used to keep Jim Crow a reality in this country. It has its historical connections to that of racism in this country, and Manchin is protecting it. But you don't have enough Democrats calling him out and saying this is what it is and launching a holistic campaign against him for doing so.
I 100% agree. It's bad enough to like pretend that the filibuster is this mythological thing that they've pretended for decades that it is, and pretend that you don't get what it's been used for. I mean, we covered a study. It's like fully half of all the legislation that has been stopped under unified government was civil rights legislation over the past 100 years. That is what it is about. But we just ended multiple weeks of national dialogue about that. So you don't get to pretend that you don't know that, Joe Manchin. You know that, and you're protecting it, either despite that or hell, maybe because of it. Maybe
yeah.
He loves
you gotta
it.
wear it. You gotta make him wear it, and that's the thing, man. Democrats are typically right on message. Okay, they're just wrong on messaging. And they tend to try to water down their own legislation. I mean, even with the infrastructure bill or the Americans Jobs bill, I don't know what they're calling it today. That was a watered down version of the initial intent. And you didn't even get to the space, right, already watered down. And you didn't even let them water it down. You just watered it down before it got to that space. Manchin is one of these cats. He is going to continue to uphold progress in this country. And isn't it sad that in a democracy where you elected a guy with more votes than any other person running for president in his history. He beats an incumbent. He wins the electoral college and the popular vote. There's this progressive agenda that pushed the excitement for his campaign. Because let's be clear, nobody was excited to vote for Biden, okay? They weren't excited, but they were excited to vote against the policies of Donald Trump and the personality of Donald Trump. You get in office and you tell me you can't do anything? There's nothing you can do because of Joe freaking Manchin? Come on, man, unacceptable.
Seriously. Yeah, and his cover is unacceptable.
Right.
I want to we have some other stuff I want to move on to for Joe Manchin, but I got to go back to a couple of the things that he just said because they're so stupid that I have to think that if stupid is the thing we're talking about, it's either that he's stupider than he could possibly be. He doesn't seem that dumb. Then he must think that I am. When he says the time has come to end these political games and to usher a new era of bipartisanship where we find common ground on the major policy debates facing our nation. Oh, that's a good point, Senator. Follow-up question, how? How are you gonna do that? Because you don't say in your op-ed how you're gonna do that. How are we gonna have bipartisanship with these senators who say nothing will pass, literally nothing, and it doesn't matter? We have bipartisanship on the policy. Republicans and Democrats liked the stimulus bill. Republicans and Democrats like the jobs bill, the infrastructure bill. There is no debate about that. The only lack of bipartisanship is in the Senate, and you're the one empowering it, Joe Manchin, by making it able to stop all legislation. We already agree. We've done the persuasion. Biden ran on these things. We talked about these things. Republicans like them. It's Republican politicians that don't. There's no end to the political games. There's no new bipartisanship in the Senate. It's not gonna happen. They don't raise money off of giving Dem senators wins. That's not how American politics works. And that is not suddenly gonna change. It was stupid when Biden implied it during the campaign. It's dumber now after the Republicans tried to steal the election. Not a single Republican voted on the COVID aid bill during a pandemic. You think they're gonna vote to make voting more? He says in that op-ed that we need to pass something common sense, like our voting bill, to enshrine voting rights. They're never gonna do that, ever, ever, ever. There's hundreds of bills in America right now doing the exact opposite. How stupid are you, or how stupid do you think we are that you think they're gonna turn around and suddenly support literally any of this or any other bill I can think of? The Equality Act, maternity leave, nothing is going to pass until we get rid of the filibuster. And Joe Manchin is either so stupid that he cannot continue to serve in the Senate until he gets that, or he knows it and he's lying to us about what's gonna happen. And he is perfectly willing to watch 2 more years go by where the Dems get nothing done, then they lose the majority and likely lose the next presidential election. And we get to go through 4 years of Tucker Carlson or Marjorie Greene as president doing whatever they want. God, I'm so sick of stupid lying Democrats.
Brother, you are preaching the gospel truth. You said a lot of profound things there, John. One of the most profound to me is the fact that there is bipartisan support for this legislation. There is bipartisan support for getting rid of the filibuster. Over 70% of Americans would like to either get rid of the filibuster or they would like to see it significantly restricted in its use. The vast majority of Americans are for a new criminal reform bill, criminal justice reform bill. Over 90% of Americans are for some level of criminal justice reform. We're talking about bipartisanship as it relates to the electorate. And once again, as you pointed out, the only body in the gridlock of severe tribalism in politics is that of the Senate. Even the House has bipartisan support for much of this, but not the Senate. This is not anti-bipartisanship when you provide the correct context. The context is clear. Americans, fair thinking, independent thinking Americans, they want to see things get done.
Yeah. What do the American people have to do? Like, the polls aren't enough. Giving the Dems the House 2 years ago isn't enough. Giving them the presidency in November isn't enough. Giving them 2 Georgia Senate seats at the same time isn't enough. What do the American people need to do to convince the country, Joe Manchin, our media, that we are not a center-right country.
Yeah.
We know what we want. We're telling you what we want. You just won't hear it because you apparently don't like it.
Here's what has to happen. At some point, Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, and other leaders in the party, they will have to launch significant campaigns against members of their own party. That has to happen. Okay, I know they like to play respectability politics, many of them. Joe Biden, President Biden himself is an institutionalist. He thinks the president should not do certain things. He thinks the president should not be involved in certain things, but he's going to have to change that leadership style in order to get things done in this country. It is a sad, sad affair when you have all of this control. You have nobody to blame but Democrats, and you're expecting to win re-election. You're expecting to have a successful midterm. You're expecting for people to come back and support you like before. That's not going to happen. America has already given you the tools you need to make this work. Joe Manchin is not a transformational character. He's not a transformational politician. He's not a guy who really believes that bipartisanship will prevail. He believes none of that. But in order for you to get a Joe Manchin to either vote the right way or somebody else in that position to do so, you have to play transactional politics with this cat. Either make it impossible for him to continue down this road and be politically popular in his state, or you launch a campaign to make sure at some point in the near future, he knows he will be primaried out. You don't really have to convince him that he will lose a general election, convince him that he will never win a Democratic primary in his life. That's how you get Manchin on board.
You're 100% right. Yeah, and in particular, if he wants to be the champion fighting the filibuster, then who is it? Obama pointed out that it was Jim Crow 2.0, and that's the filibuster is ensuring it. Okay, well, you know what? Obama's an incredibly popular politician, a great leader, and Joe Manchin is trying to help the Republicans continue to pick away at your legacy and stop Biden from doing anything, the dude that you chose to be your vice president. Obama should say, I am going to spend the next 4 years or whatever raising money for this primary, and I'm going to find the perfect candidate, and I'm going to move to his state and campaign every day. That's what he should do, and a lot of other people do, activists
do.
And
brother, that would work. It would absolutely work. Manchin would know he's not going to survive a Democratic primary. And for him, that's everything. Because if he doesn't survive the primary, he doesn't get to run for re-election anyway. Totally. And I know people will push back on that and they will say, well, here's the thing. A new Democrat cannot win in a general election because his state wants basically a moderate Democrat. Well, that's not the issue. The issue is you get a chance at Manchin being a transactional guy saying, oh hell, they coming for me for real this time, and I'm not going to be able to survive a primary. I need to adjust my politics on this. Once again, he's not a transformational character. He doesn't really believe in any of this stuff. He thinks he's playing the partisan and political line that his supporters believe in.
Agreed.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.